They say the Atlantic swallows everything, but also returns it. It was Jack's first voyage aboard the USS Horizon. He had just closed the door of his ship's cabin when he heard a voice outside. He paused for a moment, listening carefully as the voice gradually faded away on its own. Dismissing it, he turned off his room's light and went to lie down. As soon as he lay down, sleep began to overtake him. In that drowsy state, he heard another voice. Didn't pay much attention, but perhaps falling asleep so easily wasn't in his fate that night. As soon as his eyes closed, they snapped open again. He rubbed his eyes and turned on the light, looking around the room. There was no one else there. He checked outside the door, but the corridor was empty. Closing the door, he reasoned that perhaps these strange occurrences were just nerves from his first journey at sea. Smiling at his own foolishness, he returned to bed. That's when he noticed something lying near his feet. It was a mariner's coin, a token given to everyone on the ship before every voyage, bearing the journey's beginning and destination. Puzzled about how it got there, Jack bent down to pick it up, but the coin seemed inexplicably heavy. It wouldn't budge. He got down on his knees and tried to lift it, but the coin seemed fused to the floor the moment he finally wrenched it free. His room began to shake violently. Everything started falling. It felt like the room would explode, and water began rapidly filling the space through the hole where the coin had been. Through the rushing sound of water, only the sounds of gasping and labored breathing could be heard. The water level rose steadily higher and higher. Suddenly, Jack woke up gasping. Drenched in sweat, heart pounding, he turned on the light and drank some water. That's when he saw it. A mariner's coin rolling in from under the door, exactly like the one from his dream. If you're enjoying the story so far, show your support by liking and subscribing to the channel. With trembling fingers, he touched the coin. It moved slightly, and nothing happened. Everything was normal. Jack laughed nervously at his fear and picked up the coin. The room felt oppressive. Needing fresh air, he went up to the deck. As he stood there in the cool New England breeze, someone placed a hand on his shoulder. It was the captain. After Jack saluted, the captain asked, "What's wrong, Morrison? Any problems?" "Sir, I wasn't feeling good in the room. Thought some fresh air might help." The captain's smile held a hint of knowing concern. "That room. I was there for 2 months when I first started." "What do you mean, sir?" The captain took a deep breath before continuing. "There are 2 stories about that room. What's true and what's false, hardly anyone knows." He began to tell the first story. Andrew Thompson was his name, a brilliant student at MIT, but obsessed with his research on the act of denial, the human refusal to accept what exists. One day he returned home to find his mother still sick in bed as she had been for 3 days. He called out to her, but there was no response. She appeared to be sleeping, her skin yellow from illness, her hair brittle. Despite his attempts, she wouldn't eat. Angry, he too went without food that night. The next day, neighbors came banging on his door, complaining of a terrible smell. When they entered, they discovered his mother had been dead for 3 or 4 days, but Andrew had refused to accept it. The captain paused before continuing with the second story. Later, when Andrew was assigned to this ship, strange things began happening. During work one day, he suddenly had a fit, screaming and writhing in pain before falling silent. When I questioned him, his face turned serious and he said,
"He is possessed, Captain. He's possessed."
I dismissed it as an excuse to avoid work. That's when Andrew, in a rage, began smashing his head against the ship's wall before jumping overboard. We managed to save him, but had to restrain him in his room. Soon, we heard knocking, first with one hand, then two, then what sounded like an entire crowd. When we opened the door, we found him calmly writing in his diary, his restraints undone. He smiled and said,
"I told you, he is possessed. His hands were tied, not mine."
He then told us about Captain Sullivan, his former neighbor in Salem, a man who at just 45 looked 65, with sunken eyes and a disease-ravaged appearance. One night, Andrew had seen him in his dark room, and Sullivan had warned him, "Next time, don't sleep with the door open." Months later, Sullivan died in Danvers State Hospital. Jack listened intently before smiling and said with an evil in his, "Sir, you've told me everything, but you missed some details." Since his mother's death, Andrew could see and hear things others couldn't. Even after Sullivan's death, before coming to the ship, he would see him. He hoped the Atlantic would free him from these visions, but Sullivan followed him here too. And you missed one crucial detail. The captain, never more shaken, asked in a whisper, "What did I miss?" Jack's smile remained fixed. "You don't know how he ended his life. He cut his wrist." How do you know all this?" the captain asked, his voice trembling despite his reputation for bravery. "Andrew himself told me everything in that room, sir." The captain ran to Jack's cabin. The door stood open. Inside, he found Jack lying on the bed, his large frozen eyes staring at the ceiling, lifeless. Blood covered every surface of the room. His wrist was cut open. That room on the USS Horizon was sealed forever after that night. Some say on quiet nights when the ship passes through Massachusetts Bay, you can still hear knocking. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like, subscribe, and let us know in the comments. Where in the world are you watching